Welcome to my channel, dear friends and viewers. Um, Today, we are going to recap a little bit Australians prime ministers that we covered in part one, um, reforms and impacts, success and failures. Um, and then we'll start part two of the three series that will capture the action of the leaders, Australian prime ministers, and reaction of the Australian public, and briefly analyze the rise and fall of the leaders through the lens of public verdict and historical legacy. In part one, we walked through a post war Australia, a time of reconstruction, migration, and national infrastructure. It was an era when political power was more centralized, leadership often more patriarchal, and public trust more enduring, until Whitlam's dramatic dismissal broke that illusion. Now, in part two, we enter a new era where Australia is no longer isolated, but increasingly shaped by global forces. The challenges facing prime ministers are no longer just road and rail, but inflation, unemployment, globalization, and indigenous justice. Malcolm Fraser takes the reign after the constitutional crisis, but must rebuild public confidence while managing a slowing economy. Bob Hawke emerges not just as a politician, but a national figure of consensus, leading bold reforms while keeping unions and business at the table. Paul Keating follows intellectually forceful and unapologetically ambitious, reshaping Australia's economy and place in the world, especially in Asia. Unlike their predecessors, these leaders must constantly negotiate with the public, media, and markets, and party factions, often simultaneously. They face rising scrutiny, shorter political honeymoons, and greater demands of consultation. This is the age when policy and persuasion must go hand in hand. Let's now step into the era that redefined not only Australia's economy, but its expectation of leadership itself. The leaders who led Australia during this time frame included Malcolm Fraser, Bob Hawke, and Paul Keating. So let's begin with Malcolm Fraser, 1975 to 83, a Liberal Party representative or leader. Major reforms and positive contributions include multiculturalism and human rights. Established the Human Rights Commission in 1981, strong support for multiculturalism, welcomed Vietnamese refugees, marking a shift from white Australia policy. Support for Aboriginal affairs, expanded Aboriginal land rights legislation in the Northern Territory in 1976, international leadership role, opposed apartheid in South Africa, took strong pro United Nations and anti racism stance, advocated for Zimbabwe's independence and resolution of Rhodesian conflict, economic stability, prolonged wage restraint, and economic management after Whitlam's expensive spending. Environmental concerns stopped sand mining on Fraser Island, protecting key ecological sites. Uh, In part one, we ended with Ko Whitlam's dramatic dismissal, so a moment that shook Australian democracy. Now, from Fraser's conservative resets to Hawke's Keating economic revolution, we look into the welfare and Australia's place in the global economy. But this reform came with resistance, and not every policy was welcomed. Uh, Moving to the next, Malcolm Fraser's controversies and criticisms. Double dissolution and dismissal legacy came to power after controversial dismissal of Whitlam by the Governor General in 1975. His role remains highly contested in Australian political history. Rising unemployment hit record high over 10% by early 1980s. Economic conservatism criticized for underinvestment in social programs, including education and healthcare. Opposition to wage growth, viewed as hostile to union demands, leading to strained industrial relations. Aboriginal affairs underfunded, while land right advanced, funding for Aboriginal services remained inadequate. Fraser is respected internationally for his moral leadership, but domestically his economic policies were polarizing. His break with the Liberal Party in later years, critiquing Howard, shows his views evolved more progressive post office. The next, Bob Hawke, 1983 to 1991, uh, major economic and social reforms by him included representative of ALP. So his major economic and social reforms included economic deregulations. He floated the Australian dollar in 1983, deregulated banks and financial sector, opened economy to the global market, echoed with trade unions, prices and income echoed, kept wages stable and reduced inflation. Superannuation system introduced compulsory employer funded superannuations for workers. Universal health care reintroduced Medicare 1984, ensuring free public health care access. Education reforms included boosted university enrollments, expanded HACS program. Hawke's consensus driven leadership saw cooperation between businesses and unions, unlike Fraser's confrontational style. His economic reforms modernized Australia's economy and laid groundwork for global competitiveness. Medicare and superannuation remains core legacies of his governance. Uh, Known for progressive leadership and global standing, Um, Bob Hawke had some environmental achievements, protected Antarctica from mining, pushed for global conservation zones, halted damming of the Franklin River, major environmental wins, and on the social sector, social policies, anti discrimination laws were strengthened, including for women and LGBTQ plus people. Strong advocate for reconciliation with Aboriginal communities, though Mabo decisions came later. Foreign policy, he strengthened ties with Asia Pacific, supported APEC formation, APEC, led peacekeeping in Cambodia, and supported nuclear disarmament. He was a charismatic and pragmatic. Hawke made economic transformation palatable to voters. He popularized the ideas of clever country and inclusive prosperity. His consensus based leadership model was admired by even political opponents. However, he was not uh, out of controversies and criticisms. So let's look into Bob Hawke's controversies. Economic inequality, market Liberalization led to greater wealth disparity in some areas. Industrial strikes, while early years saw calm, late 1980s saw rising union unrest. Education funding gaps, public schools underfunded despite HECS, equity concern emerged. Delayed indigenous progress, while he promised a treaty with Aboriginal people, it wasn't delivered. Privatization, he began trend of selling of public assets such as Qantas, Commonwealth Bank, controversial to many. While often praised for balancing economic growth with social justice, Hawke's record on public assets sell-off has drawn criticism. Indigenous policy fell short of his own promises, which Paul Keating would later address more directly. Still, Hawke remains one of the most popular and respected prime minister in Australian history. Moving to the next icon, Prime Minister Paul Keating, Labour, also 1991 to 1996, and economic modernization and national identity. In his period, we saw introduction of compulsory superannuation, 1992. He created a long-term retirement saving system, mandated employer contribution into super funds, strengthened national savings and reduced pension burden, supported financial market expansion. He is seen as critical social and economic reformer. Keating's introduction of compulsory superannuation in 1992 marked a major step towards financial self sufficiency for Australian retirees. It complemented other reforms like enterprising, bargaining, and national competition policy. Economists credit it with building Australia's robust pension infrastructure. This is, however, a little controversy still there that even though super fund has been established, but gradually we see the year of uh, uh, for the retirees to get access to their super is continuously being increased. Uh, His second main feature during his governance time period was indigenous and cultural recognition efforts. Redfern's speech 1992 and Mabo response are the key um, events. Publicly acknowledged injustices to Indigenous Australians. That was the first step before um, another prime minister later came in to publicly extend apologies. Um, Kevin Rudd. So he supported High Court's Mabo decision on native title. He laid groundwork for Native Title Act 1993 and sparked new era in reconciliation and legal reform. He is widely praised in later historical assessments. In summary, Keating's Redfern Park speech marked the first explicit government recognition of colonial wrongs towards Aboriginal people. It was followed by legal support for land rights after the Mabo decision. Though politically costly at that time, it is considered one of the Australia's most honest reckonings with its past. This is a source of AIAT and National Museum of Australia. Moving on to the final stage of Paul Keating, he is also involved in some policies and decisions which went little against him. So these are unemployment, political isolation, and GST rejection. 1993 fight back election and economic challenges opposed liberal proposal for GST led by John Hewson, campaigned on fairness and economic equity, faced rising unemployment post recession early 1990s. Many reforms seen as technocratic or unpopular. He lost public support by mid 1990s despite reform legacy. Although Keating's government is praised for long term vision, it struggled with high unemployment and opposition to perceived elitism. His working nation strategy sought to address this, but labor fatigue and leadership style made re election difficult. He lost to Howard in 1996. Source: The Conversation, the Parliament of Australia. I will end this part at this stage and reflect on what we have covered thus far and where we are heading to. As we close this chapter, we leave behind a nation economically reformed, socially activated and charged, and no longer content with passive leadership. Fraser, Hawke, and Keating each wrestled with a changing Australia, one where policy had to speak to the wallet and the conscience, and where leadership required not just authority but persuasion. I'll end and we'll come back to you, my friends, with the final part of this vlog series. And till then, you take care, and it's all the best from my side. Bye bye.